Hello, in today's quick video I'm going to be talking about archetypes. We get very excited about archetypes in personal development work and talking therapies, so I just want to talk about what they are, why it's become more difficult to use them recently, and how you can begin using them in your life. This will be the beginning of a series, so I want to follow it up by picking individual archetypes, then unpacking them and showing you how you can personally use this in your personal development. As ever, if you find this video useful, then please give it a like. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel and make sure to leave me a comment to let me know what you want me to talk about next. Okay, so let's start off by exploring what archetypes are. The word comes from arche, Greek, it means primitive, and tupos, which means model. So primitive model. So it's like the root ideas behind a lot of our storytelling and a lot of our ideas about what people are, how they function, and the ways that we think about ourselves. I've been watching a lot of Brooklyn Nine-Nine on Netflix lately. I really like that show, and one of the reasons that we like the main character, Jake Peralta, so much is because he's a fool. And we know what a fool is. We may not consciously think that, but we know that a fool is meant to be amusing, meant to say silly things that makes us laugh, but also kind of undermines restrictive authority and allows us to progress over time. That's what a fool is, that's why it exists. And the idea behind archetypes is that there's this huge reservoir of these root ideas, these characters, that pop up all over the place, and they are what we make use of to tell stories. And as all humans are storytellers, that means that it ends up being the way that we think about ourselves and the way we think about others. If we begin connecting with the feeling behind a queen or a king or a warrior or a hero or a traitor or a coward, we begin to have very strong feelings that tell us a lot about those people, those ideas, and we might find ourselves using phrases to describe people or situations. He was acting like a madman, she was as regal as a queen, he was going off like a fool. All these kind of things, we're drawing on this reservoir of archetypes, and because we all know what they mean, it's like a shortcut to a whole bunch of feelings and beliefs that we all seem to hold. So one of the resources that I often recommend to people is a deck of archetype cards by a woman called Caroline Myss. I don't have a deck to show you at the moment because it turns out that each time I buy one of these decks, I end up giving it away to someone because they want to do some work with it. So I've had and given away lots of decks. Anyway, this is what they look like. And there are 80 cards in Caroline's deck, and they're used in all sorts of different ways. And I'll be coming at the end of this video to explain how you use archetypes. But there's just one thing I want to talk about first, which is that archetypes have become much more difficult to use in the last 20 or 30 years, I would say. And I can explain why. So archetypes became fashionable and socially acceptable and used within therapeutic circles thanks to a guy called Carl Jung, who I'm sure you've heard of. He was a student of Freud's, and he was writing and exploring ideas at the end of the Enlightenment in Europe. There'd been this massive influx of ideas from around the world. Buddhism had arrived in Europe not long before, and there had been this big surge of a movement called modernism. So modernism is a philosophical term, but it was appearing all over the place. Industrialists and engineers believed that if you understood the mechanics of something well enough, then you could control it and predict it. There was a big movement in cosmology and astronomy that if we understand how the universe works well enough, then we can predict everything. And within sort of psychology and the study of people and medicine, there was this idea that if only we knew everything there is to know about the functioning of the body and the brain, then we could predict everything that a human would do. And we, if presented with someone who was upset or struggling in some way, then we'd have a magic bullet that we could give them, which would solve all their problems. But a lot of time has passed since then. And throughout the 20th century, we've moved from modernism into something called postmodernism. And this is the idea that we can't really know very much at all. Quantum theory has taught us that the whole universe is a series of probabilities and not a clockwork machine. People are vastly more complicated than we thought they were once. So we no longer try to categorize people or put them in boxes, and we approach life with a much more open mind and a willingness to explore and experiment with ideas. A lot of stories, movies and books and things these days are intentionally trying to undermine traditional models and roles and archetypes in order to tell a more compelling and more relevant story. So These days, when I present archetypes to my clients, or when something seems to come up where archetypes could be useful, what I'm finding is that they don't immediately recognize some of these energies, these ideas, these feelings, because we don't think like that anymore. 20, 30, 40 years ago, if you'd grown up with the Disney movies of that time, you'd know exactly what a king or a queen was meant to be. Now, if I say, hey, connect with the idea of the monarch, there can be a lot of learning to do, or a lot of figuring out what the hell you're talking about, because your idea of what a queen or a king feels like, looks like, presents like, is so different, perhaps, to mine. And it takes a while to kind of dig down deeper into this idea and find the root meaning, the primitive model that lies beneath our individual concepts. We just naturally rebel against the idea of shared universal beliefs and ideas these days. So archetypes are now much more difficult to connect with, but when we do find that root model, that primitive idea, I still find that there's a universal resonance with it. We still feel what a warrior is like. We still know what we mean by a coward. So archetypes remain relevant, but I just want to point out that they're more difficult to connect with than they used to be. And if you are beginning to explore this idea and you don't immediately go, yep, I get it, I know exactly what that feels like, then there's nothing wrong with you. That is just what's happened in our culture. We don't think like that anymore. Anyway, that aside, a couple of ways that you use archetypes. One is discomfort. So I might be working with a client and I'll realize that there's a whole area of stuff that they need to confront, or things that they need to unpack and explore, and I might introduce an archetype which is going to help them to confront that through their own discomfort. We're always very interested in discomfort in talking therapies. It tells us a lot. So, for example, let's say you are a very intentional person. You try and control everything. Perhaps people around you might say you're a little bit domineering or controlling or even angry, but your experience is that you're just working really hard, you're doing your best, and people keep kind of throwing problems at you, but you are constantly trying to overcome them, and you're really focused. I might introduce the idea of the victim. What does it feel like to be a victim? Why is it that you try to control things so much? What is so frightening about the idea of being powerless and not pushing forward in your life? Presenting these kind of contradictory ideas can suddenly throw up a whole bunch of stuff, belief structures, emotions, fears, that we can work with, and that leads to huge personal development. But it starts with, let's find something really uncomfortable, a resonant, deep, primitive model, an archetype, which will stir the pot and challenge you to think more, to go deeper, and to let go of some of your predispositions and your ideas about how the world works. But of course, I might do it completely opposite way around. If I have someone who in the chair who thinks of themselves as small and unable to cope and struggling all the time and out of their depth, I might say, okay, well, the victim seems to be a really important archetype for you. So let's explore that idea, and then maybe let's throw in the hero, the warrior, the monarch, something powerful and motivating. And that brings us on to the second way that you use archetypes, which is inspiration and motivation. Some archetypes we think of as being negative, some we think of as being positive. All of them have something to teach us, all of them have positive and negative aspects. So sometimes what we need is a little bit of injection of energy or some direction or a framework to use as we begin to motivate ourselves, push ourselves to grow, tackle a particular problem. And so we might use an archetype that draws us on through this. If you're someone who's quite set in your ways and you know that's a problem, but that's just the habit that you've built up, you just tend to do the same things all the time. We might look at the explorer or the adventurer as an archetype and imagine you at the tiller of a great ship and you're exploring the world. Capture that energy. What does that feel like? Does that resonate emotionally with you anywhere? And if it does, then let's use that and let's follow that and let's conjure up that energy on a daily basis to try to inspire you to do new things. And if it doesn't resonate, there's some growth to do there, because what's getting stuck there? What's getting trapped? So we use archetypes often as a motivational and inspirational thing. We pick an archetype which embodies maybe something you want to develop, something you want to capture, something that will push you through a challenge that you're facing, and we connect with the feeling of that, the energy, the drive, the the methodology maybe of that. Again, going back to the idea of the fool is there to lark around and be amusing, but also it's challenging and undermining expectations. Sometimes we capture the fool, connect with that energy, and we can use that to sidestep and escape from places you've got trapped. So that's just very briefly how we use archetypes. We're either using them to introduce something that's dissonant, that's uncomfortable, that's challenging, in order to stir the pot, in order to try to find new ways to develop and grow and confront belief structures, or we're using them to inspire, motivate, push through, perhaps strike out in a new direction, perhaps grow something which has for a long time been dormant. So I hope that's been helpful as a kind of introduction. I hope that you have some idea now about what an archetype is, how we use them. If you want to go and buy a deck of those cards and begin exploring your different archetypes, the ones that resonate most deeply for you, the ones that are very uncomfortable for you, that can be interesting. What I'll be doing is I'll be doing short follow-up videos to explore individual archetypes like the monarch, the warrior, the hero, the traitor, the lover. These kind of archetypes, they each bring a feeling and they can each help us with a direction of our personal growth. So I'll be following this up with individual examples of archetypes. Until then, take care, make sure you've given this video a like, make sure you've subscribed to my channel to see my next updates, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, bye-bye.